Okay, so we're gonna start now. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. We are ESLP. We are the Educational Sustainability Living Program. This organization is completely student run, and this class has been organized by the students for the students. We also just want to give some appreciation to our faculty sponsor, Sue Carter. She is the provost for College 8. And yeah, I guess we can begin. Yeah, also to anybody else who continues to join, there's a doc for everyone to sign in. If y'all could like get into that, scribble down your name. Yeah. So we're gonna begin with some community agreements. Also Nick, my other facilitator for today, is going to please chime in. Let me know if I ever forget anything. Yeah, for like intros.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Nick, he, him. I'm an ESLP organizer. And so real quick, we're gonna go over the agenda for tonight's class. So welcome to everyone. Real quick after this, we're gonna do community agreements. And then we're gonna go over really quickly our project plan outline, which is basically the syllabus for the course. Then we're gonna take a quick break and then introduce tonight's guest speaker, Rick Flores, who's going to present. After his presentation, we're gonna have some time set aside for a Q&A with Rick. And then we will be introducing all of the action research teams, which are the discussion sections that y'all can sign up for. So really quick right now, we're gonna go over community agreements. So does anybody know what community agreements are? You can go ahead and type an answer in the chat or whatever you like. So community agreements are like a set, yeah, exactly. It's an agreement between all of us on how we're going to conduct ourselves and act in this class. And so these are meant to be made by all of us together so that we're all on the same page about them. So we have this document and we have a couple of community agreements already that we want to make sure everyone is okay with. So first off, if you're able to, please use your camera so that we can see each other and connect to each other better. If you have questions, please use the chat so that while other people are talking, so that we don't interrupt each other. And while you're not speaking, we would prefer that you mute your mic, especially if you're in a loud place, so we don't interrupt each other. Would anyone like to suggest a community agreement or propose one?
I have one.
Go for it.
Just like being respectful, generally respectful of everyone's ideas and comments.
Yeah, and in addition to that, I think whoever's speaking kind of has the floor and give them that space to speak without being interrupted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, also just to build on that, a popular one I do like is make space, take space. If you're like talking a lot, acknowledge that. And if you're not talking enough, maybe speak up.
Another important one is to make sure we're all comfortable, or we all know that it's okay to get up and go to the bathroom or take care of anything that you need to during the class. Feel free, take care of yourself. Would anyone like to add any other community agreements?
I have one. In one of my other online classes, when people had questions, they just kind of like spoke over the professor, and it was really distracting. So I feel like if people do have questions, there's the like raise your hand feature, and that can be helpful. So then whoever is leading it can call them out when it's time.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I'm also an organizer. My name's Athena. We're monitoring the chat as well. So if you don't feel comfortable like saying your question, you can also feel free to type it there, and we'll like make sure to verbalize it and make sure that it's addressed.
Yeah, also acknowledge that this is a fluid document. So if things come up in another time and another space, like please feel free to add this, and these resources will be available like on our website. Yeah. Does anybody else have anything else to say before we transition into our syllabus TPO? Okay, we're gonna move on then. We'll come back to this another time.
So I see a question from Haley. We don't actually have a Canvas page, but all of these resources will be sent out in email and are available on our website. So this is our syllabus for this class, Carson 161 for 5 unit and 61 for 2 units. At the top of that document, there's also a new student briefing document that you can look at if you have any questions. But for now, we're gonna go through just the policies in our syllabus. So if you need to contact ESLP, all of our contact information is here. So the Zoom link, the website for our course, the email for ESLP, and for our academic sphere. That's for questions regarding section enrollment or anything to do with your action research team facilitators. And also our faculty sponsor, Sue Carter. If you could please also CC those 2 emails for any of those questions, the administrative questions.
Isabel, yes, we will. You guys will have access to the doc. You can find this document and other resources on the website, and we can send that link out. I think it was within the email that we sent yesterday as well. But if you don't have it, let us know. We can definitely like send it out today as well. Along with our lecture series, which is today, the spring series on Wednesdays, we also have the action research teams, which are also known as sections. There's Apocalypse 101 with myself. I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself. I'm Eiley, by the way. And my other co-facilitator, Claire, we will both be doing Apocalypse 101. That's going to be on Mondays from 1:20 to 2:25. And yeah, we'll be sending out the link. There's also Filipina X Peoples with Athena and Louise. Theirs will be Tuesday, 1:30 to 3:05. And then the other one, Nick, if you'd like to take that away.
Yeah, the third section will be Cultivating Community with myself and Amy Cuevas. It'll be Thursdays, 11:40 to 1:15. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we'll be touching more on about the arts in a bit later, so. Yeah, but this class is all about radical sustainability and basically just rejecting the traditional white neoliberal sustainability through a perspective of social justice and activism. This course's theme for this year is the personal and communal sustainability in the midst of an environmental collapse. We're going to be aiming to build community through horizontal education, mainly just disregarding like vertical education. Like we are not all vessels. We're trying to learn from one another, have some combos, get things vibing. Yeah, and there's going to be a 2 and 5 unit course. That is the distinction between the 61 and the 161. And the main difference of this is just time commitment. 2 unit courses will have a 5 to 7 hour commitment, and 5 unit courses will have a 10 to 12 hour commitment. Yeah, and just let us know if you ever have any problems with sections, changing this, talk to your facilitator, email us. Yeah.
So as you know, we're the organization Education for a Sustainable Living program. We're a student on-campus org of undergrads. Here's our mission statement. We're a collaborative space focused on reshaping the way we learn within academia, embracing student agency and providing opportunities to engage in issues of social and environmental justice. And our goal is to create a new educational space based on horizontal learning and critical pedagogies. What that means is acknowledging that all of us have our own knowledge and experiences that are valid and valuable.
Yeah, I also just want to mention that this class is like put together through student fees, and we just want to say we appreciate y'all and everything that everyone's been paying, because like courses like these or opportunities like these are available. So yeah, shout out to everybody. Yeah, and then you can also check out our learning outcomes. This is basically like a timeline of things that we have planned for the next following weeks. This week will be Rick Flores, and then next week we'll be having a panel and so on, but you'll be getting weekly emails from us about this. So.
All right, so here is a quick breakdown of how grading and time commitment will look for 2 units and 5 units. So for 2 units, attendance and participation will be 5%. Actually, all of the grading is basically the same between 2 units and 5 units, except that for 5 units, the final project will be worth a little more, and 2 units will have to do a student self-critique. And then below that, we have a time commitment breakdown that shows like the difference in the amount of work between 2 units and 5 units. So as you can see, for 5 units, there will be a little more work and time involved with assignments and reflections for the lecture, as well as the amount of work that you'll be assigned for action research teams. What that work will look like will kind of depend on your action research team, but we'll talk more on that later. And we also want to acknowledge that ESLP, while we will be reviewing your work, we are not actually giving you grades. We are merely suggesting a grade to Sue Carter, our faculty sponsor, who will ultimately determine your grades. So rest assured that your grades are not in the hands of other undergrads. Our late assignment policy is that if you turn in work after the due date more than 2 times, we would ask that you schedule a check-in with your facilitators to see how we can support you and help you catch up. In addition to that, work for action research teams will have its own, each action research team will have its own late assignment policy.
So we are expecting y'all to be here often, majority of the time, at least. We definitely, if you're like missing more than 3 of the lectures of like your section, like please come talk to us. Like we can try to work something out. Like please don't miss on your work, because like participation is a pretty decent chunk of this course. So you just being here and being present with what's happening is really appreciated. And just let us know if you have any other issues with that. And then accommodations. If you are needing a DRC accommodation, please send that letter at the end of week 2. And this will be going to our faculty sponsor, Sue Carter. And she will be viewing that and be approving it and getting all those things going for us. Yeah, also if you want to know more about this, there's also, you can contact the Disability Resource Center at the number here provided. Or you can also email them. Or you can reach out to us. We definitely have knowledge and experience about how this process works. So shoot us an email as well. Yeah. academic integrity expectations. Kind of shame blurb that you get in all your other classes. This is an academic community, and just don't cheat. Just be honest. Just be yourself. I don't know what else. And yeah, and then our community agreements will be posted here as well, because this is also a fluid document. This will probably be changing with time, with any comments, recommendations, etc. Yeah, and then our assignments. So the assignments for this course for everybody, the spring series portion, because everyone will be having their own assignments in their arts, and then also here in this lecture series. And we are going to be expecting everyone to be turning in reflection papers. And basically, reflection papers are just a way of you taking notes, like throughout the speaker's presentation. You can take notes however you like. You can draw a poem. You can draw some doodles. You could write notes. You could write an essay. Do whatever you're vibing with, as long as you're just like interacting with the content, like writing things that are resonating with you. Like that's all that we want to see. And mainly these reflection papers will be helping to build on your midterm, and your midterm will be based on like your favorite speaker, and will be requiring for everyone to be turning in all the reflection papers for all of the speakers. So please become familiar with this, do it, because we will be needing it at some point in time. And you will as well. Yeah, and then the midterm exam will be providing a prompt, and it will be a take-home midterm, but you will need your reflection papers or your notes for the speakers to try to build on that, and we will be requiring those on the midterm day. Midterm day is going to be week 5, April 29th. And yeah, it will be posted. We will let y'all know a week ahead of that time. Bonnie, that is correct. Your reflections will not be turned in until the midterm day, but we expect you to be keeping up with them because they're going to help you throughout the midterm. So yeah. If you have any questions, just email the Atmosphere or email ESLP. Be glad to answer those questions for you, or now. Yeah, and then our final is going to be a final project. It's going to be based on your action research team, and the final is going to be based within your section, building on the blueprint for a sustainable campus. And yeah, with time, we will figure that out in your own section, art. Yeah, and then we'll be posting a grading rubric for the midterm soon enough.
And then also here we have a schedule, just a breakdown of what will be going on each week in the spring series with the speaker and any outside reading or activities. This will be updated throughout the quarter, so keep an eye on it. Yes, we will be expecting a reflection for every speaker, but as stated, these will not be due. The first 5 will not be due until, or 4, I mean, until the day of the midterm, week 5. So stay on top of them, but if you need time to work on them, these lectures will also be recorded. So you'll be able to review it later or do it later.
Yeah. This was our PPO. We are gonna open the floor for any questions. Or did you have anything else to say, Nick?
Yeah, really quickly, I did want to go over how enrolling in the action research teams will work. Yeah. So for the first, we're going to start having action research team meetings next week, week 2. During that week and the next week, all students are free to pop in to any of the action research teams and see if they like it, but you will need to commit to one that you want to stay with by the end of week 3. And don't worry about your enrollment on Canvas for now, but we will answer those questions later when we go over the action research teams and introduce them.
Also, if you had trouble enrolling, it should be open now, and anybody who has enrolled into Section D or will enroll into Section D, please like swap out your sections that you would like. And also the sign-in sheet also has an art section for you to sign up as well on that document. Yeah, are we good then? Does anybody else have questions? We can open up the floor for anybody to ask what they would like. No? Oh, there are questions in here. Alicia, can we sign up for a committee or for a different section that we enrolled to? Yes, you can. How do I edit the sign-in sheet? Damn, I really thought it was editable. We will work on that. Should we have notes and a reflection from every presentation? Yes. Well, okay, the notes and the reflection they're kind of synonymous. Like you can reflect on, the presentation, or you can take notes on like what is being said. But yes, something for every speaker presentation that we do have. And just clarifying from Haley, we will be turning in assignments through the email. No. You're going to be turning in your own assignments through Arts and like through Google Classroom on there. And then for this series, you will turn everything in with the midterm at a later date. We're not sure yet how, but we'll see. Is there a folder with all these docs that has been shared with us? No, there's not a folder yet, Alex. There's going to be a website, and then at this website, you can find these resources there. Where is the art sign-up sheet? It is on the classroom sign-up sheet. There's like another page. So in order to enroll in a section, would we sign up to the art sign-up sheet? To enroll into a section is like more like on the class search database, I believe. You should probably email us so we can like talk more about this, but you should still sign up on the art sign-up sheet too.
Lindsay, yeah, your reflection can include handwritten notes and a picture of them. The reflection can be basically anything that shows that you are engaging with the content. So whatever you learn from best or you like to do the most. The art sign-up sheet, yeah, that is in the link posted in the chat. And Sierra, we actually do not have a Canvas page.
Okay, we're gonna close this section gap and we're gonna take a break for about 5 minutes. Stretch, get up what you wanna do, because you're about to be sitting for like 40 minutes. Okay, if we could get everybody back, we're gonna begin soon. I also want to mention to everybody that if any questions that they do have for Rick, the speaker, if you all could just leave them in the chat, and then we will go through them after Rick is done with his presentation, and we will engage with that. Okay. Oh yeah, some announcements we got. We advise you guys to take some notes during this presentation, prep for the midterm, and some Q&As after, get those questions going. We're also offering multiple positions and internships, volunteer work even. And then if you're with us for long enough, for at least like a quarter or two, you may be eligible for a stipend as well, getting paid for the work that you're doing in this organization. The deadline to receive an internship is on the 9th, which I believe is next Thursday. So email us if you have any questions, if you want to get involved, if you want to know more about the work that we're doing. We would love to hear from y'all and your interest. Okay, Rick. So Rick Flores, the Horticulturist and Steward of the Amah Mutsun Relearning Program. Fantastic program. It just talks about all of the different practices that they've been using, like sustainable practices in agriculture. Yeah, Rick has a professional experience at the Arboretum with the California native plants, and he currently is working with other gardens as well, helping maintain displays of extraordinary plants. As a steward of the AMRP, Rick fosters the relationship between the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band and the Arboretum. He also oversees educational programming and helps develop displays of culturally important native plants. Yeah, and there's his email if you ever want to get in contact with him. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for having me today. Before I begin, I'd like to just read the UC Santa Cruz land acknowledgement. The land on which we gather is the unceded territory of the Awaswa-speaking Yupi tribe. The Amah Mutsun Tribal Band, comprised of the descendants of indigenous people taken to Mission Santa Cruz and Mission San Juan Bautista during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast, is today working hard to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands and heal from historical trauma. With that, I will share my screen here. Let's see here. Oh. Okay, hopefully you can all see that right now. So today I'm going to talk to you about the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band and their efforts to relearn what's known as traditional ecological knowledge so they can get back on the path of their ancestors to care for Mother Earth. First, I'm going to talk a little bit just about what we know about California Indians pre-contact, and then I'll go into why there is a need to relearn, because a lot of people don't know why, you know, this indigenous community has lost cultural knowledge. And then at the end, I'll go into how the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band are actually relearning and why that is important for us all. So, you know, if you ever do a Google search of California Indian tribal territories, this is the map you usually come up with. California was an incredibly diverse place at the time of contact. There were between 400 and 500 autonomously functioning tribes and about 100 different languages. And so early anthropologists didn't really know what to make of this, you know, great cultural diversity here in California. And so when you look at this map, what it actually is early anthropologists' attempts to make sense of that diversity, and they basically lumped tribal groups into linguistic groups. So this is more of a linguistic map than it is a actual tribal territory map. And you can see on the Central Coast there, it says Costanoan. That's not even an indigenous word. That word comes from the Spanish word costeños, which simply meant people of the coast. In actuality, this is what the Central Coast looked like at the time of contact. You can see the capitalized words there. Those are language groups. The smaller names there are the names of tribes in this area. And so the Amah Mutsun today are the descendants of the Awaswas and Mutsun speaking people there. And you can see right where UC Santa Cruz is, it says the Yupi tribe. You also hear the term Maloney a lot, and I won't read this slide, but this is kind of where the term Maloney came from. It was first used, if I go back a little bit, you can see kind of just above, if you go up the coast of Santa Cruz, you see Coroste Valley Cultural Preserve. The tribe that's right about above that was called the Alone tribe, and that's where the term Ohlone came from. And so you have, you know, these politicians using it in their letters in the in the mid 1850s. And then there was a switch in spelling, you know, later on. And then it became Ohlone after that. And then you had Alfred Kroeber, who was the father of the anthropology department at UC Berkeley. He used that term in his 1910 Handbook of American Indians north of Mexico. Which popularized the term Ohlone into academia. What Kroeber also did in his book is he said all the Ohlone were extinct, which has had you know, pretty negative ramifications for those tribal groups considered Ohlone. And then in 1978, you had Malcolm Margolin write his book, The Ohlone Way, which then popularized that term into, you know, more mainstream media. But that's where the term Ohlone came from. So, we know for, thousands of years, California Indians were managing the landscape so that it produced quality and abundant materials for them. And they did this through what's known as traditional ecological knowledge. And I like to use this term here, or this definition here from Frequent Berkey's. It's from his book, Sacred Ecology. A cumulative body of knowledge, practice, and belief. My screen's kind of cut off there, so I'm not sure if there's anything after that. Evolving by adaptive processes and handed down through generations by cultural transmission about the relationship between living beings, including humans, with one another and their environment. And so Western science has tried to understand what exactly traditional ecological knowledge is. And I like to use this diagram to explain what it is. It's also from Frequent Berkey's, but he analyzes it on 4 levels of analysis. At the first level, you have the local knowledge of land, animals, plants, and ecosystems. On the second level, you have the land and resource management system. So when is the appropriate time to go out and hunt or set a fire or harvest certain plants and things like that. And then on the third level, you have the social institutions that govern the management systems. And then on the fourth level, you have the worldview. And when you look at the literature today, when people write about the worldview of California Indians, there's a word that you'll see a lot, and that word is Centricity, which meant that California Indians viewed plants and animals and ecosystems and mountaintops and waterways as kin, as relatives, and as as they were kin, they were tasked by the Creator to care for them. You often hear the elders say, if you don't use a plant, it'll feel unwanted and it'll leave. And we're seeing that in some ways today due to the lack of management systems on our landscape. So later on, when I talk about the Amah Mutsun relearning, what's important to note is that what they're relearning are the first 2 levels of analysis: the local knowledge of land, plants, and animals and ecosystems, and then the resource management systems needed to sustain those land, plants, and animals as well. Throughout time, they have held on to their social institutions. They have stayed together as a tribe, and they've also held on to their worldview of kincentricity. So, a lot of the management practices that they were using at the time of contact, this is from a book called Tending the Wild, which is by one of our friends, M. Cat Anderson. It's a wonderful book if anybody wants to delve more into the way California Indians were managed. But they were doing things like coppicing, which simply means cutting a plant to the ground and letting it resprout, pruning, harrowing, sowing, weeding, burning, digging, thinning, and selective harvesting. Through these, they encourage desired characteristics of individual plants and increase populations of useful plants. And they altered the structures and compositions of plant communities through their management practices. And this is really important, and I'll get to that later. But without doubt, fire was the most significant and effective tool that California Indians used, to sustain various ecosystems and to increase the productivity of useful plants. This is what's known as pyrodiversity. And, burning was pretty extensive here on the Central Coast at the time of contact. So what this map is provided by our colleagues at UC Berkeley, Rob Kutro. And what he did is in 769, there was the first overland expedition into this area by the Spanish. And it was called the Portola Expedition. And so what this map represents is the path that they took up the coast. And if you look at this map, all those kind of checkered or pyramid shaped on the green landscapes, those are all the places that the Spanish encountered burning here on the Central Coast. Burning was so extensive that they mentioned that they were having a hard time finding pasture to feed their horses. Also recorded having a hard time finding downed firewood so that they could cook with and keep warm at night. And they also selected their campsites based on where they could actually find pasture to feed their horses. You can see from the map that they were actually traveling north in October, and that was typically the time when fires would be set. They were usually set in the early fall when the ground was damp and the weather was cool. So you really got these slow moving, low intensity wildfires rather than these kind of fast moving, high intensity wildfires that we think of today. And the theory is today that they were burning roughly every 3 to 5 years on the coastal prairies and roughly every 7 to 15 years in the oak woodlands and redwood forests. And they did this because they knew that disturbance increased richness. And so what this graph shows is in ecology, there's what's known as the intermediate disturbance hypothesis, which says basically that intermediate disturbance promotes the greatest or the highest amount of species richness on the landscape. And this is likely what Native American burning was doing here on the Central Coast. And so there's a bit of a debate in academia about whether or not California Indians were farming. And there's another wonderful book called California Indians and Their Environment by Kent Lightfoot and Otis Parrish, who Kent Lightfoot is a colleague and archaeologist up at UC Berkeley. And he argues in his book that California Indians were not farming, and to call them farmers or on their way to farming really denies them the uniqueness of their culture. And so when anthropologists look at the continuum of human history, they go from like hunter-gatherer to agrarian societies or farming societies. But California Indians were not hunter-gatherers. You know, they were more sophisticated than that. They were managing ecosystems and promoting and changing the composition of plant communities. But they were not agrarian or farming societies either. They were operating somewhere in the middle of that. And this middle section is often referred to as proto-agriculture. And you can see that in this diagram here. California Indians were doing all these different things. Irrigation really wasn't happening here on the Central Coast, but California Indians in the Eastern Sierras and down in the Southwest deserts of California were irrigating crops at the time of contact. But they were basically doing everything except genetic engineering. And you know, if you read kind of the figure headline there, the distinction between wild and domesticate in plant exploitation is not a sudden or marked change, it is a gradual transition. Native American tribes in California did not domesticate crops, yet they still managed and cultivated wildland environments with a array of techniques, causing changes at different scales. And so proto-agriculture is not defined as, on your way to farming. Rather, it can be, a long-term stable adaptation within. So, what Kent argues in his book is that California Indians had no need to farm because they were cultivating plants and managing ecosystems and burning the landscape. California really was a land of plenty because of that. And they had no need to farm. If any one food source failed in any given year, there were plenty to fall back on. And plus, they were storing large quantities of food. They were storing large quantities of seeds and nuts and acorns as well. So they were not farming, but they were cultivating and sustaining ecosystems through their management practices. And so for every day of every year for millennia, the indigenous people of California interacted with the plants and animals that surrounded them. And through this, these long lines of, family lineages, they developed a very intimate knowledge of plants and their uses, and also, the ecosystems and what the ecosystems needed to, thrive and sustain themselves. And so the next section of my talk can be kind of difficult for people to hear because it's not something that you hear a lot in school, but it speaks to why, you know, the Amah Mutsun community is relearning. And that goes into the way that the Central Coast was colonized. As I mentioned, you know, the first overland expedition was in 1769, called the Portola Expedition. Mission Santa Cruz was founded in 1791. So within a span of, you know, 20 years, life really changed here on the Central Coast. And you can see by 1821, the Spanish had established 21 missions, 4 forts, and 3 towns on indigenous lands along the coast. 81,000 people would be baptized in the missions between 1769 and 1834. Of those, 60,000 had died in 1834. The important thing to note about these numbers is they're only counting the native people who died in the missions. They are not counting who were baptized in the missions. They are not counting the countless other Native Americans who died outside of the missions who were never baptized. And so, you know, if I go back, you know, when they were taken to the Spanish missions, the Spanish mission was really an institution used to assimilate Native Americans into Eurocentric culture. In the missions, they were not allowed to practice their culture. Families were separated. Women were kept in one barracks. Men were kept in another barracks. The children were kept in a separate barracks. So this passing down of knowledge, cultural knowledge, became extremely difficult at the time. And the Spanish did this intentionally to try to break their culture. Once they were in the missions, they were not allowed to speak their languages, practice their ceremonies, or go out and tend the land as their ancestors did for thousands of years. Also in the missions, you know, the Spanish soldiers didn't come over with their wives or partners. So there were a lot of instances of rape within the missions where Spanish soldiers would go into the women's barracks at night and rape the women. When you look at the birth records of the Spanish mission period for Native women, there's a lot of father unknowns in those records. And the tribe interprets that as instances of rape between Native women and Spanish soldiers. In addition to the Spanish mission period, there was also a brief Mexican period here. And this was a time when the Mexican government gave out these huge land grants to Mexican farmers and ranchers. The land grants were anywhere between 20,000 and 200,000 acres. And labor was needed to run these ranches. And so what they would do is they would again raid Indian villages. At this point in time, there were less and less Indians on the coast. So they had to go farther inland to capture Indians, and they would bring them back to these ranches and use them as captive slaves. I'm not exactly sure when this flyer was sent around, but what you're looking at here is a Native American girl who's being sold into slavery.
Hi, we're going to cut to a quick break to work out these technical difficulties. But we'll let you know when we're back.
Hi, I'm back. Sorry, my connection is kind of funny. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Rick.
Okay, I'll just continue. So the state actually funded both bullets and for the voluntary militia to go out and hunt and kill Native Americans, and they were paid anywhere between $10 and $25 for proof of executed Indians. In the mid 1800s, California was also selling bonds for the extermination of Indians. This is a picture given to us courtesy of the Bancroft Library at UC Berkeley. It shows that a bond is created in the amount of $250. And if you look at the kind of the right under the artwork there, you can see in boldface type, it says for expeditions against the Indians. So if you think of bonds today, we sell bonds for improvement to roads and schools and infrastructure. But in the 1850s and 60s, California was selling bonds for the extermination of Native Americans. And then what's not talked about is the role that the early North American conservation movement played in the violent dispossession of Native Americans from their homelands. We all know John Muir. He's kind of the father of the conservation movement. He helped establish the national park system and things like that. But John Muir was also a racist. He had disparaging remarks to say about Black people, about Jews, and he didn't even think Native Americans belonged on the landscape, and he advocated for their violent removal from Yosemite. It wasn't until the US cavalry was chasing Native Americans out of Yosemite that they found Yosemite Valley. And if you don't know, the word Yosemite comes from the tribe that was there in the valley, and the word Yosemite to them meant killers, and it's what they were screaming when the US cavalry was raiding their village site. So these wilderness sanctuaries that John Muir talked about were not created by God. They were created by the US cavalry, who violently removed Native Americans from their homelands. And much of this is steeped in kind of this racist history of Western academia. This is from a book, The Natural History of the Human Species, by Charles Hamilton Smith, I believe. This is in the introduction of that book, which was written in 1851. The whole mass of facts leads to the conclusion that the dark races are inferiorly organized and cannot to the same extent as the white races understand the laws of nature, and therefrom obtain an increasing light and knowledge that they bear the stamp of their inferiority in their physical organization. And so this brings me to the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band. You can see, from this pretty violent, terrible colonial history here in California, through no fault of their own, they have lost cultural knowledge pertaining to ethnobotany and uses of plants and the ways to manage plants as well. But today they're working hard to relearn that knowledge through many efforts. And as I mentioned in the worldview, you may ask why they're relearning, but this is a quote from Chairman Valentin Lopez. In 2005, tribal elders came to a tribal council meeting and said, "We have to get back to caring for the land. Creator never rescinded our obligation to take care of Mother Earth." So this speaks to, the worldview that California Indians have, the worldview of kincentricity. And so how are they relearning? Well, they're relearning through, one of which is through the work of Ascension Solorzano and John Harrington. Ascension is a tribal matriarch. She was the last native-born speaker of the Mutsun language. She was recognized from a very early age to be a knowledge holder. She was trained down at Pinnacles National Park. She was a doctora and a medicine woman. She ran a hospital out of her backyard in Gilroy. And it said that people used to come from miles around to seek her care, and even Western doctors from Stanford and USC would visit her from time to time to understand how she was treating people. But you know, she was born in the mid 1850s. She passed away in the late 1920s. But you know, in the late 1920s, she was diagnosed with cancer, and she knew she was going to die. And at the same time, there was this man, John Harrington, who was from the Smithsonian Institute, who was tasked by the federal government to come out west to record elders' knowledge, because they knew that all the elders were dying, and with their death, their knowledge was dying too. And he had known and heard about Ascension for some time. And so, and somehow he heard that she was preparing for her death. So he kind of rushed up here. He was doing work with the Chumash and Indians in the deserts, and knocked on her door. And for the last several years or several months of her life, John Harrington moved into the basement of her house, and they worked together daily to record her knowledge. Today, there's roughly 80,000 pages of what's known as the Harrington Notes at the Smithsonian Institute, with his interviews with the Ascension and other Mutsun tribal members. Harrington once remarked that he had never known a woman with a better memory. And Ascension at that time was educated, which simply meant she could read and write. And so she took meticulous notes about how she was treating people as well. One of the stories Chairman Lopez tells is that, you know, she was in a lot of pain from her cancer, but she refused to take any Western kind of pharmaceuticals because she didn't want the pain medications to cloud her memory. And so it's through these notes that the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band are relearning cultural and ethnobotanical knowledge. Another way they're relearning is through the help of California Indian tribes that have been able to hold on to their knowledge better than the Amah Mutsun. So these are pictures of Julie Tex and her two daughters, Mandy Marine and Carly Tex. They are from the Dunlop Band of Mono Indians, and they have held on to their basket weaving traditions through their matrilineal lines for countless generations. And this was part of a research project we did at Pinnacles National Park to understand the tending practices that these basketry plants need in order to produce quality and abundant material. And so they came and helped us in the field understand how they tend the plants and what the plants need to produce that material. And then the third way that the tribe is relearning, and this is kind of unique to California Indians, is through the formation of the Amah Mutsun Land Trust, and also collaborations with a lot of Western, you know, environmental organizations and institutions and academics. You know, historically, you know, Western academia hasn't really treated Native Americans with respect, particularly within the fields of anthropology and archaeology. But today we have, you know, the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band working with archaeologists from UC Berkeley to help them relearn. And they're only working with, you know, academics as long as they have, you know, the final say in any kind of research projects that go along. But you can see this slide shows all the different organizations that they've been collaborating with, from the Bureau of Land Management, the National Park Service, which is you know, kind of a turnaround, given that, you know, the National Park Service was responsible for the violent dispossession of Native Americans from their homelands in the first place. And then various environmental organizations in the area, Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District and Semper Virens funds are all good partners to the Amah Mutsun Land Trust. And so this is kind of their project territory right now. These are the different projects they have going on, all the way down there in the south from Pinnacles National Park up to the north to Corroste Valley Cultural Preserve and Pie Ranch, and the UCSC Arboretum as well. At the heart of the Amah Mutsun Land Trust is what's known as the Native Stewardship Corps. And these are tribal members who come out to the coast. One thing I didn't mention is, you know, the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band do not live within their tribal territories anymore. In the early 1900s, there was a diaspora out of this area where many of them moved out into the Central Valley, where they found work on ranches and farms. And they're a poor tribe. They're not federally recognized, so they do not have any economic assistance from the federal government. And now, as you probably all know, this is a very expensive place to live, and they are priced out of living here. So the Native Stewardship Corps brings tribal members out to the coast throughout the year to engage in various projects along the coast, such as up at Beccarose Valley Cultural Preserve, where they're currently trying to restore the grasslands, to Pie Ranch and the UC Santa Cruz Arboretum as well. They also engage in archaeological work, both at Chitoni Coast Dairies and at Wilder Ranch State Park. There's a Native Youth Stewardship Camp that brings the youth out here to the coast, where they engage in kind of restoration activities, learn about ethnobotany.
All right, we will take a quick break once again to wait for Rick to reconnect. So thank you for your patience, everybody.
Sorry, everybody. My internet connection apparently isn't as good as I thought it was. But I will continue. So we've been creating gardens at the UC Santa Cruz Arboretum for them to use to relearn native plant identification and ethnobotany. Research projects at Pinnacles National Park, researching basketry plants, white root sedge and deergrass, which are important for making waterproof baskets. And then in 2011, we were able to actually burn the deergrass stands. Deergrass needs occasional burning to rejuvenate the plants, so they actually produce more abundant flower stalks, which are used in baskets. And what the project down there really said is, you know, when I first visited McCabe Canyon at Pinnacles National Park, I went in there with, native plant people and taxonomists, and they were all remarking how beautiful the plant life was there and recording what plants they saw. The first time I went into the canyon with Native American basket weavers, Julie, Tex, and their two daughters, Mandy and Carly, they took one look at this area and thought, oh, this is awful. Because they were looking at the plants as resources, and they knew that because these plants hadn't been tended in well over 100 years, that they were not going to produce quality and abundant material for them. And this is just an example of how those materials are used. So you see the white stitching material, that's white root sedge. That's the rhizomes of right root sedge. You can think of rhizomes as like underground roots, but when you tend sedge beds, you can get rhizomes that grow 6 to 10 feet long, that are straight and lack kinks, bumps, or bruises, which are the prized rhizomes. If you look at the picture, the material that's coming out of the basket to your right, that's deergrass. That was the stuffing of their coiled baskets. And the unique thing about deergrass stalks is when they get wet, they expand. So when these baskets got wet, the stuffing, the deergrass inside the baskets would expand. It would tighten up all the stitches, and that's how they made waterproof cooking baskets. The tribe has also been doing a lot of work up at Crostay Valley Cultural Preserve. This is an historic site because the Portola Expedition was there. They called this site Casa Grande because they said it had a huge roundhouse in the middle of it. The Portola Expedition was actually really struggling along when they came to this village site, so much so that the priest was reading some of the expedition members their last rites, and the Crostay people took them in and kind of fed them and nursed them back to health. These are, and tribal members have been a part of this every step of the way. These are tribal members helping to do the archaeological research at Crostay Valley. What they did was they unearthed old fire pits to understand what Californians were burning and cooking. And what they found at this site was California Indians were burning and eating a lot of grassland seed foods, a lot of seeds from native grass seeds and wildflowers. And the nut they found the most of was our native hazelnut, not acorn. So it's thought in this area, perhaps hazelnuts were also a really important part of the diet. And so getting back to TEK, for thousands of years, California Indians were burning the landscape, which sustained certain ecosystems such as coastal prairies. So this map really shows how an ecosystem can change without management, without disturbance. So on the left side, you have 1982 Crostay Valley vegetation. And if you look at the coloring, you can see how much of kind of the valley floor there is rangeland or grassland. The Douglas fir trees are in the kind of reddish color, and the shrubland, which would be like coyote brush and poison oak and things like that, would be that yellowy color. And so, California State Parks acquired this land and didn't have the funds to disturb it, to burn it, or to manage it. And so they let it lie fallow. And so if you look at the map on the right from 2012, you can just see how much the grasslands have decreased through the encroachment of Douglas fir forest and shrublands. And we know that shrublands and Douglas fir forests don't provide a lot of culturally important plant material for Native Americans as coastal prairies do. So it would have been beneficial for them to burn the coastal prairies and keep them open. So what we're seeing in this map really is a decrease in biodiversity of California's landscape. Tribal members are also relearning traditional ways of making fire. They're working alongside archaeologists from UC Berkeley. This is a picture at Wilder Ranch, I believe, where they've been doing some archaeological research to help them understand past lifeways. They've participated in several cultural burns, first at Pinnacles National Park, and this is a picture from right up Empire Grade. I'm drawing a blank on the name of that area, but it was in collaboration with the Semper Virens Fund. And all the cameras that are around, that was because PBS Nova was there that day filming this burn. And PBS Nova came out with a 4-part series called America, and the Amah Mutsun are featured in one of those series. And so why is this all important? Well, because we have this idea of wilderness in this country. And when the first European explorers came here, they thought they were looking at wilderness. They thought they were looking at a landscape that human beings did not manage, did not touch. did not sustain. But in actuality, the productive and diverse landscapes of California were in part the outcome of sophisticated and complex harvesting and management practices. And so when we look at what we think wilderness is today, this is the definition of wilderness. It's a place where man and his own works dominate, in contrast with the areas where man and his own works dominate the landscape, is hereby recognized as an area where the earth and its community of life are untrammeled by man, where man himself is a visitor who does not remain. This is a complete erasure of indigenous history on the landscape. We know Native Americans were not mere visitors here, and we now know that they were, through management practices, they were changing the composition of plant communities and sustaining ecosystems. And so, beyond the whole ecology and plant knowledge of this all, what this really is for the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band is a way to heal from the historical trauma that they've suffered through generations of colonization. And it's important to note too that, colonization is a process. It didn't happen, 150 years ago. It continues to happen today to Native American communities. But Native American communities are coming up with novel ways to both relearn and to perpetuate their cultures in this time. And so for the Amah Mutsun, these ideas of relearning traditional ecological knowledge and promoting their worldview of kin-centricity here on the Central Coast is a way for them to heal from historical trauma. And I can stop there and say thank you, and I can take any questions folks might have.
Hi everybody, I'm Claire, I'm with ESLP. One of the first questions that we have is, this person has to be anonymous, and they asked, why does Rick use Indians? My community and I view this as a racial slur. Why doesn't he say indigenous? So just, if you could answer that question, Rick, that'd be great.
Sure. I kind of move between Indian and Indigenous and Native American. In my work with the tribe, they have referred to themselves as all of the above as well. When I've spoken with some of the people, Native Americans that I've worked with, they have told me it doesn't matter to them what you call them between those three references. They know who they are. And a lot of here in California, a lot of the books use the term California Indian. You look at Kent Lightfoot's books, California Indians and Their Environment and stuff like that. So that is why I use that term and the other terms as well. And so I apologize if that was offensive to some people, but with the tribal members I've spoken to, they are not offended by that term.
Hi everyone, Athena again. We had a question from Sierra asking about what time period was in relation to the Mexican period. Sierra, also, if you want to hop in on the mic real quick, if we're doing your question justice. If not, you can feel free to ask.
Yeah, maybe just more of like putting in maybe a super simple timeline of how it went, just like to make it a bit clearer. Would be great.
Yeah, so, sorry. So the Mexican period wasn't really that long here. The Spanish mission period happened from, like 1791 through probably like the mid 1830s or 40s. And then I think California, and then between that period and when California became a state in the 1850s was the Mexican period. So it was somewhere around the 1840s was the Mexican period here.
Okay, the next question we have is from Alicia saying, could you repeat the book name, the one before the tribal band slide?
The one before, California Indians and Their Environment. That was by Kent Lightfoot. There's another book I mentioned, which is Tending the Wild,
Rick,
which is by M. Cat. Which part? The book names? Sorry. Can you hear me?
Hi, Rick, are you there? Are you able to hear what I'm saying?
I'm here. Yeah, I can hear you. Hello?
I can hear you too. Let's see. Are folks still there?
I can hear everybody, I think.
Okay, so I think students are hearing Claire. You might be having some connection issues.
So the second book was Tending the Wild by M. Cat Anderson. And then the very first book I mentioned is a book called Sacred Ecology by Fikret Berkes.
All right. Next we have a question from Justin. They were hoping you could touch on the segment about the Mexican. Oh, is that Rick gone?
I'm here.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, they were wondering if you could touch on the end of the segment about the Mexican government period. It just seems like the audio might have cut out a little bit for that portion. More specifically, like referencing who the rancheros were. Were they also just Spaniards, or were they different?
I don't know the makeup of the rancheros, but it was you know, the Mexican government when they were in California ended up giving out huge land grants to folks, and I'm guessing, you know, some of them were of Spanish descent. You know, but I don't know exactly who they were. I can't hear you. Oh.
If anybody has any last questions now, feel free to ask or type it if you feel more comfortable with that. Okay, we have a question from Crystal saying, sorry if I may be heard wrong, but does anybody speak the Mutsun language after Ascension passed? If I pronounced that wrong, I apologize.
So the Mutsun, there are no fluent speakers of the Mutsun language now. But what's really interesting is that the Mutsun language was recorded in great detail by Harrington, and it is what is referred to as a recoverable language. And the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band has been trying to relearn the Mutsun language. There's actually a dictionary that's published of the Mutsun language by the University of Arizona. So if you did like a search for Mutsun dictionary, I think you can find it online, but there are no, there are no fluent speakers of the Mutsun language today. And Ascension was the last native-born speaker of that language. And the Awaswas language, the language that was spoken, here in the Santa Cruz area, unfortunately, that language is lost to time. It was never recorded in any great detail. There's a few fragments of it here and there, but it's not what can be called recoverable.
And then we have another question from Alicia. They're asking if you could repeat what you said about the concept of wilderness and how we see wilderness versus the tribe.
Well, a lot of us think of wilderness as, I put up that definition, wilderness is a place that is untrammeled by man, where man is just a visitor who does not remain. But again, that definition is a complete erasure of indigenous history, because indigenous people were not mere visitors. They lived on the land here. And not only that, the landscapes and the wildflowers and the ecosystems that the first European explorers saw here were plants and ecosystems that had been tended and managed and sustained for thousands of years. Indigenous people were responsible for the biodiversity that was seen here by early Europeans. So, in essence, this area was not untrammeled by man. It was the product of thousands of years of indigenous stewardship on the landscape.
We have a question from Isabel talking about how wilderness is in relation to John Muir and the environmental movement as well.
Yeah, so John Muir really brought that kind of definition to the Americas. This idea that, landscapes and things were God's creation, and that, people didn't really have a part in it other than to, hike around in it. He didn't really understand that what he was looking at was the product of thousands of years of indigenous management on the landscape. So, when you look at the history of wilderness, it's changed over time. In biblical times, if you were cast out into the wilderness, that was like a punishment, and you were basically like doomed to death. And then there became this more romantic version of wilderness over time, where the wilderness was a place where you ventured out to go find yourself or find solemn calm, as John Muir had said. But I think for indigenous people, it wasn't wilderness to them, because they were part of the landscape and responsible, for what was in that landscape as well.
Thank you. Yeah, perfect explanation.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? All right, with that, we would like to thank Rick for being here and presenting for us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Rick.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was lovely. Thank you for all of this insight you have provided us. Yeah, we're going to be transitioning into talking about our action research teams, our arts. So we'll begin with the first one. This is myself and my co-facilitator, Claire. We're going to be talking about Apocalypse 101. Our section time is from 1:20 to 2:25. Yeah, we're just going to be touching about touching on the combos of apocalypse, what this really means, how can we mentally and physically prepare ourselves for these different types of scenarios. Yeah, we're going to be giving some brief intros into eco-weaving, gardening, woodwork, sewing, Yeah, it's gonna be a great time.
Eileen, did you also want to intro yourself?
Oh my God, yeah, I feel like I did earlier briefly. I am Eileen. I am an ESLP organizer as well. I'm a third year plant sciences major. I'm vibing. Yeah, this is like my first year here in ESLP. It's a great time. I would recommend anybody to try to get involved if like this work interests you. It's a great space, great people. Come through. Yes.
Yeah, and I'm Claire again. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a CREST major with a education and sustainability minor. I've been a part of ESLP for 2 years now. And yeah, we're really just wanting to like do some cool shit in this action research team and like have some fun and some convos, and also considering like the current pandemic we're living through right now. Just like recognizing that, and that some people are calling this an apocalypse. So just like coming together and talking and sharing. So yeah, we'd love to see you there.
Yeah, thank you so much. Does Athena or Louise want to speak on this, or?
Yes.
Okay, go off.
Hi, Athena again. I use they, them pronouns. I am a second year psych and CREST major. And yeah, I'm facilitating this course with Louise. Louise, are you here with us?
I'm right here. Hi, I'm Louise. I'm a third year. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a art and business management major. Yeah, and I'm also an organizer for ESLP, and our class is about Filipinx peoples, and it's about decolonization and the effects of colonization in the Philippines and Pacific nations, and how, you know, how we go from there and how that affects us, and like how do we create spaces for people who don't really have spaces for that, because we don't really have a platform, you know, so we want to create that space. And if Athena have something to say, go on.
Yeah, the class, while it's focused on the struggles of Filipinx people, it's kind of almost like a case study of just the effects of colonization as a whole on specific minoritized communities. So a lot of the concepts are applicable to multiple groups and communities. And so that's why we want to open it up as a space for all POC and Black people to feel comfortable to share their like lived experiences and any like kinds of oppression that they may have faced, and how that might affect how they view sustainability or operate within it. So yeah, and again, Tuesdays, 1:30 to 3:05, please feel free to pop on by. And
Hello, it's Nick again. He, him pronouns. I'm a third year environmental studies major and legal studies minor, and I will be co-facilitating the Cultivating Community Action Research team with Amy. Are you there, Amy?
Yeah. Hey guys. I hope you can see me. I'm Amy. I'm a fourth year. I'm also a transfer student, sociology major, and I use she, her pronouns. Nick and I will be going through like talking about what it takes to form a community, like cultivating like a happy, fun space for people to be a part of, learning about food systems, food sovereignty, understanding like where food comes and goes. Nick, did you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, we also want to focus on building a community in our action research team between all of the students and the facilitators, and creating a space where we can trust and validate each other's knowledge and experiences. So come through.
Please.
We have a question from Cassidy saying, in the email explaining action research teams, cultivating community seem to rely a bit on physical resources like the college gardens and food pantry. Is that still true?
Yeah, so when we were planning this action research team, we were wanting to use a lot of the resources on campus as learning aids. Unfortunately, that will no longer be possible, but we are planning some at-home do-it-yourself activities for including like gardening and potting your own plant. So yeah, sad about that, but
we did find like some resources, like apps and things that you can do like for like those at-home activities. So it'll still be interactive, just like from a digital platform.
All right, and with that, we would like to thank you all for attending the class. Please feel free to email us if you have any questions or concerns, and we're looking forward to seeing you in action research teams next week.
Thank you guys so much.
Here's a quick overview of what will be going on next week. We will have a panel by alumni Adlemi Garcia, Tash Guyen, and Kira Bradley. We have an assigned reading, Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire, chapters 1 and 2, which will be sent out. And we would also like it if you could go over our website really quickly if you're interested in finding out more about us. Also, if you're interested in interning or volunteering, feel free to contact us.
Yeah, thank you so much all for being here. I see a question. Can you copy paste the link for the assignments into the chat? Yeah, we can definitely leave a link of like the website, and then the syllabus will be there, and like that's where the assignments will be as well. So yeah, thank you so much all for joining us today. Let us know if you have any questions. If not, I think we're gonna end it here. Thank you, Rick, for being here as well. And we're so excited to see all your lovely faces next week on Wednesday. Oh, if anybody else has any closing remarks.